All right, moving along. Here is Miss Reed's third period class. These are the dice rolls from her third period class. And these were submitted by students that did the student information survey. And so the instructions were to roll 2 dice and record the sum. And so these are the values that were recorded by Miss Reed's third period. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is put these in order from least to greatest. I can't do anything until I've done that. All right, now that I have these in order from least to greatest, I can already see some really good information. I can see my minimum value is 4, my maximum value is 12, and then from there I can get my range, which is 12 minus 4, so I have a range of 8. I can also go ahead and see what my mode is. I see that I have 3 5s and 3 8s. Those occur the most frequent, or have the highest frequency out of all my data pieces. So I have a mode of 5 and a mode of 8. All right, so next thing I need to do is I need to go ahead and start looking for my median. Once I have my median and my data is split into 2 halves, I can find my Q1, which is the median of the lower half, and my Q3, the median of the upper half. And now that I found a middle value, it's important to draw that vertical line. I do have my median, and my median is 8. And so I can also record this down here as well. So my median of 8. What that did is that used up this 8 right here. So 8 is no longer part of my data set because this 8 is used up as the median. And I've split the rest of my data. I have a lower half of my data and I have an upper half of my data. All right, so I want to find the median of my lower half of my data. Draw my vertical line. This, of course, is my Q1, which is 5. I can go ahead and record that. And then now I just left to find the median of my upper half of my data. That gives me my Q3 value of 10. I can record this. Now I can find my interquartile range, or my IQR, which is my Q3, which is 10 minus my Q1 of 5. 10 minus 5 is 5. I have an interquartile range of 5. So my 5-number summary helped me gain a whole bunch of information, and I'm able to look at my data in a new way. Now, we want to take this and we want to apply it. Now, what we need to do is we need to put this onto a number line. And so that's the most important part, is our number line. And I've been teaching this for a couple of years now. And what I've noticed is that every single year, the students, where they get things wrong, where they make mistakes, where they have errors in this part of the unit, is just because they did not do their number line correctly. And it might seem kind of silly that here we have a number line that we've been using since kindergarten, pre-K. We're all experts on the number line. However, for some reason, when we get to data analysis, students forget how to make a number line. So this is hugely, hugely important. All right, so there's 5 steps in order to create my box plot, right? So my first step is my number line, which is the most important step. Once I've made my number line, then I can go ahead and I'm going to plot my 5-number summary. Once I've plotted my 5-number summary, then I'm going to mark my medians. The 4th step is I'm going to complete my box, add the whiskers. And then I didn't do all this just for fun. I did it for a purpose. I want to look at it and I want to get some information from it. And so we want to analyze for our last step. All right, so we've talked about what all this is. Let's actually look at it and see it in action. So I have my number line here. I notice my Minimum value is 4. My maximum value is 12. And so trying to determine a scale, I think I'm going to start with a 4. I know I want to end up with 12, and so I'm just going to count by twos. So 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. You can count by ones, you could count by threes, fives, whatever you think is appropriate for your data set. But just looking at this is the way that I wanted to do it. All right, so first step is done. Made my number line. And again, that is the most important step. All right, and you do have to do your number line first. I think that's where students try to cut corners and where they start making mistakes. They try to do their number line last. And you can't do your number line last when you've already made your graph. So you need your number line first, then make your graph onto your number line. All right, plot your 5-number summary. So I have a minimum. So I'm going to go ahead and put a dot up here for minimum. So at 4, dot at 12 for my maximum. I have a Q1 value of 5, a median of 8, and a Q3 value of 10. All right, so you should have exactly 5 dots for your 5-number summary above your number line. All right, done that, my next step is to mark my medians. And so my median is 8. Then I have my Q1, which is 5. And then I have my Q3, which is 10. All right, so I've marked my medians. And so far, I haven't really done anything new. This is all things that I've been doing all along. Now, here's where the new thing comes in. Step 4, you want to complete your box and add the whiskers. So all you do is you just make a box out of your 3 medians, and then you just add your whiskers. And I think I want to make that one a little bit prettier. All right, there we go. And there you go. You have your box plot. It is now complete, done, and ready to analyze. And so now we're going to analyze it, and we're going to see, so I'm going to kind of move so I no longer see my answers up at the top. And now, can I gain meaning from my box plot? By looking at my box plot, do I know what my minimum is? And of course I do. My minimum is this piece here, which is 4. Do I know what my maximum is? Yes, I do. My maximum is here, and my maximum is 12. Do I know my median? Of course. I can look right here in the middle, and here's my median, and my median is 8. What about my quartile 1? I can look, yep, my quartile 1 is 5, and then my quartile 3 is 10. So I got all my information from looking at my box plot. So if I gave you a box plot, you can read the box plot and pull the information from it. Range, well, range is super easy. That's just 12 minus 4, which is 8. And my interquartile range, which is my Q3, 10, minus my Q1, which is 5. And I have an interquartile range of 5. And if I scroll up and look, yep, those are the same answers. So I was able to gain accurately all of my information. But what about the mode? So just looking at, so I'm going to go ahead and scroll up so I no longer see what the mode was. But if I just look at my information here, my graph here, my box plot here, what is the mode? And unfortunately, I cannot tell what the mode is. I only see 5 pieces of data. I see my minimum, and I do know that my minimum is part of my data set. My maximum, yes, I know that's part of my data set. Median, sometimes median is part of your data set. Sometimes median falls in between 2 numbers, and you have to find the average or the mean. So sometimes median is part of the data set, sometimes not. Same thing with my Q1 and Q3. So I have 3 numbers. I'm not even sure if they're part of my data set. I just know that they are medians or middles of pieces of my data set. So unfortunately, there's no way for me to be able to tell what my mode is. So I have no idea what my mode is, and I have no idea how many pieces of data I have. I have no idea how many pieces are in each section or quartile. And so there's some drawbacks to a box plot. All right, so let's look at my box plot and let's compare it. So this is the same box plot that we just made. And we're going to compare this to a dot plot, all right, and see what we see. And so I notice that my minimum is 4. I notice that my maximum is 12, right? And then I look and yeah, 8 seems to be about the middle. Okay, fair enough. And then I'm not really sure beyond that. I would have to go ahead and put all my data pieces out and find the medians. But it looks to be, pretty comparable. What else do I notice about it? Well, I notice that there's a lot of data here between 4 and 5. I notice that there's, it looks like kind of a big gap here. A big gap here, right? And so it's kind of, they look similar. I can see some similarities. I can probably infer some things from it. But let's talk about what this is, and let's talk about how we can get a little bit more meaning out of it. Remember that a quartile is a fourth of the data. So I have 4 quartiles. I have 1 quartile. That means 1/4 of my data, or 25% of my data, is in that range or that area. I have another quartile, which means 25% of my data is here. I have another quartile, which is another 1/4 or 25%. And then I have my final quartile. Whoops. So that means I have 1/4 of my data over here. I have 1/4 of my data here. I have 1/4 of my data here. And then I'm left with 1/4 of my data there. Now, you might be thinking, since I have this, let's look at the second section here, this second quartile. So if I look at this second quartile right here, what we notice is that this seems to be a very large section, especially as compared to this one. So if I were to ask you which quartile is bigger, which would be a trick question. If we were actually taking a test, I'd probably put that on the test. Which quartile is bigger? Well, a lot of you guys might say, well, it's this one here. This one is bigger. But if I asked you which is bigger, 25% or 25%? Of course, you would say, oh, those are equal. They're the same. And that is true. So here, this 25% is the same size as this 25%, even though they don't look the same size. Well, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that because this appears to be smaller, what is actually happening is my data is just packed in tighter. I have more data around a small amount of numbers. So I have a whole lot of data between 4 and 5. Right? I have 1/4 of my data is just in that little bitty section. And then I have 1/4 of my data between 5 and 8. And so I have 1/4 of my data here in this section, but it's just spread out. So it appears to be bigger, but it's just more spread out. And then between 8 and 10, I have 1/4 of my data is in that area here. And then I have 1/4 of my data at the end. And so what we have is we're just seeing the way that it's spread out. And so you don't get fooled that just because a quartile looks smaller, that it's bigger, there's more data there. It's actually the opposite. It's more packed in, and so that's why it looks to be smaller. It just takes up less space because it's more packed. It's more dense. If you want to, we'll slide that across disciplines magnet over. We'll relate that to science and density. So it's more dense. I have more, higher density of data in that area. All right, so the benefits of a box plot is that it's a summary. I can see really, really quickly what my overall data looks like and how it's spread out. And I can see the spread of the data, the shape of the data, very, very easily. If there's an outlier, I can see that very easily. The drawbacks of box plots is that I don't know most of the data points, and I don't know the number of data points I have. All right, I know that was a lot. Let's get one more practice on one more set of data, and then we'll be done with this video. All right, so here I have Miss Reed's first period paper airplane flights in feet. And so Miss Reed's first period, when they made their paper airplane, they flew it and recorded how many feet their airplane flew. First thing I need to do, as always, I need to put it in order from least to greatest. All right, so when we did that, we can notice that, well, there was a huge gap right here between 18 and 29. I wonder what that will look like. I wonder if that means 29 is an outlier. So we may have noticed some things, maybe wondering some things, and that's perfectly fine. We'll see what that looks like. All right, so in order from least to greatest, I can record a few pieces of information. I know my minimum, I know my maximum. From there, I can find my range. All right, now I need to go ahead and begin finding my median to get the rest of my information. In this case, I have two numbers in the middle, so I have to draw my vertical line in the middle in between my two numbers. 10 is not my median. 11.5 is not my median. That means that 10 is part of my lower half of my data. And that means 11.5 is part of my upper half of my data. So neither of those numbers are used up. So in order to find my median, I have to add 10 plus 11.5. And when I add those together and divide it by 2 to find my mean of those two numbers, then that will give me what my median value is. And so 10 plus 11.5 divided by 2 should give me 10 3/4, 10.75. And now that I've done that, I can record my median. And then now my quartile 1. All right, so quartile 1 is 3. Same thing for my quartile 3. All right, so that gives me 13. So my interquartile range is going to be 13, or my Q3, minus my Q1. And so I have an interquartile range of 10. All right, so I got a bunch of really good information. We can go ahead and translate this onto a box plot. Again, remember, my most important part of my box plot is my number line. You need to do your number line first. All right, so let's see. Starting off with a 1 going up to 29, I think I might count by 5s until I get to 30. So I'll go ahead and start with 0, 5, 10, all right. And there's nothing wrong if you want to have your scale be slightly different. This is just what I'm choosing to do for mine. All right, so step 1 was to go ahead and draw my number line. Step 2, plot my 5-number summary. So I have a 1, and on the other side, a 29. A median of 10.75, a Q1 of 3, and a Q3 of 13. All right, next step is to go ahead and mark my medians with my vertical lines. Then I can go ahead and finish my box and add my whiskers. Now that I've done that, I've made my box plots and I'm ready to analyze. So step 5, look at it, gain meaning from it, understand it. And so here, what I notice is that sure enough, that outlier of 29 caused a skew in my data. And I see that it is skewed right. All right, so remember, there's the same amount of data in that quartile as there is in this quartile right here, or the same amount as in this quartile here. Right, so each one of those sections or quartiles or fourths is 25% of my data. This one all the way over here is just spread out, is large because of that outlier. It spreads that section of my data out. All right, so with that, we can look at this same information on a dot plot and see the same thing. So here, I have a small amount, I have a small, or what looks like a small amount, a small space, because I have a lot of data. So it's highly dense. It's very dense parts of my graph. And then I have this skew, I have my skew again here, right? And then I have just this other fourth of my data here in the middle. All right, so hopefully this all made sense. I know this was a longer video. I apologize for that, but I feel like it's very important that I go through this and give each piece the adequate amount of time that it deserves. If you still have questions, watch the video again. Watch it over and over again, pause, flip through it, and please take the time to understand this so we can be successful this week. Of course, if you have questions, I'll see you in the Google Meet.